Okay, let me move my mic over. Chris, what are you doing, Chris? Let's talk about the Las Vegas Raiders, who maybe of any team, I think it's actually a fact. Um, of any team in the NFL in the off season, they have made so many changes, the most changes, really transformational. If you want to look at it that way, I do. And let's start with the very top, right? Pete Carroll comes over after a year or two off, and he joins the Raiders after we thought that he was gone. Pete is 73. That's okay. He's a young 73. Obviously, a Super Bowl winning coach or national champion winning coach in college. So comes from with a great background. People love Pete. Players love Pete. Brings a lot of energy, and it's certainly a vibe change, right? You know, when you have Antonio Pierce, who I love Antonio Pierce because he was with the Giants Super Bowl team. Love Antonio Pierce, but the Raiders needed an edge, right? They needed someone to kind of bring or usher in a new era. And Pete Carroll can do that. But I just want to start off this team preview by saying, let's pull back the expectations a little bit. I know Pete is saying that he thinks his Raiders are going to go to the playoffs this season. Love that confidence. They're at 6.5 wins, according to odds makers and sharp bettors, for a reason. And not only are they in the very difficult AFC West, but if we look at Pete Carroll's initiation into a roster, into a franchise, it ain't like it turns over overnight, right? Pete Carroll started with the Seahawks, started coaching the Seahawks in 2010. First two seasons, they were 7-9, which was better. It was better than how they did previously, right? Had some Matt Hasselbeck in there, what's the name of the quarterback? Tavares Jackson was his quarterback at a certain point. 2013, Russell Wilson joins the picture. And obviously, things changed when Russ got there. 2013, they go right to the Super Bowl and they win it. Unbelievable year for Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson, who changed the game there, changed the landscape. They had a few players that changed the landscape of the Seattle Seahawks, but it was in 2013 and 2014 that they went to the Super Bowl. They lost in their repeat showing, of course, to the Patriots famously. But then after that, no Super Bowl appearances. After that, some playoff appearances, but nothing spectacular. Some players start to leave or retire. Things are kind of average, right? There's some struggle now as Russell Wilson gets older and he's not as capable of just making magic happen on every offensive play. I'm not saying I don't think Pete Carroll is a good coach. I think he's a very good coach. I think he's a very good motivator. I think he's a good leader. But he needs a good quarterback. He needs a quarterback that can bring him to the promised land like most coaches do. Like, this isn't a coach who's necessarily going to come in there and coach up a Jared Goff or a situation like Dan Campbell has and turn the entire program around. At least I'm not convinced of that necessarily. So Geno Smith now is 34. Geno Smith brought over from Seattle to Vegas, has an edge, a chip on his shoulder. No doubt about it. Geno wants to show out with his ex-coach who loved him. They have a good dynamic. So again, I talk a lot about that dynamic and how important that is for team success, right? Coach and quarterback. If they are symbiotic, if they get along well, if there's a connection there, if they're empowering each other to be great leaders for the team, that works. And obviously, the quarterback has to be a pretty good player. Geno Smith is good, but he was 21st in the NFL last year in QBR. Some of those stats started to devolve. And I like Geno. He throws a nice pass. I think he's still probably in the top 15 to 20 quarterbacks in the league. He's certainly not a bad quarterback. But to believe that this team is going to turn around completely in one season, even though I know Pete says they're going to the playoffs, I'm not so sure about that. They also brought in offensive coordinator, offensive guru, if you will, Chip Kelly, who we all know had some experience in the NFL prior. Remember those seasons with the Eagles? It was pretty scary for a second there as a Giants fan, but ultimately did not work. But probably better in an offensive coordinator position. Obviously, Tom Brady has part ownership in this franchise, so maybe that's a part of their more aggressive moves. They also drafted Ashton Ginty, the power back, who seems ultra confident walking into the NFL from college and certainly looks the part. Ran over some guys in preseason in his second preseason game. They also have Brock Bowers, who apparently, according to players, is consensus the most dangerous, talented tight end in the NFL. So they have some parts here to put together some better results, and they better. Because last season, of course, without a real quarterback at the position and plenty of lapses in roster talent, they were one of the worst offenses in the NFL. Too reliant on an productive passing attack, and not much of a run to speak of either. I mentioned that Geno declined last season. Some of that is because he didn't have great protection. And I rate the offensive line of the Raiders very average. Now, left guard Dylan Parham had a great season in 2024. He's on the rise. They have some younger guys in the line that are on the rise as well. But they re-signed Alex Kappa, questionable re-signing. He's on the right side of their line. This is an average group right now. They have high upside, though. If they can figure out, and maybe with some ingenuity from Chip, how to create a run game that actually produces, now you open up the pass game for Geno Smith. We saw that work for him in their playoff year with the Seahawks. And they certainly have plenty of talent at the wide receiver position, and now with Brock Bowers to make something happen. So a lot of ifs, a lot of potential. I'm certainly not going to pull the trigger here and say this team is going to the playoffs. You're not going to get that from me. And I think this is going to take some time. But it depends how much time it's going to take, right? Because how much time does Pete Carroll at 73 and Geno Smith at 34 have to figure this out as a tandem? Their defense last season was better than their offense, but still average to below average in most categories. Of course, they have the stalwart defensive leader, Max Crosby, is an absolute animal at defensive end. But he kind of did it himself. They were 22nd in sack rate, so nothing jumping off the screen there. They did have some good signings. I like their signing of Jeremy Chin, safety, a talented kid coming over. That's just it's a good pickup. And also cornerback Eric Stokes from Green Bay, a young guy who's accelerating on his end too. Cannot mention Elandon Roberts from Pittsburgh, linebacker from Pittsburgh, gets very high grades on Pro Football Focus, brings over good experience from a good defense in Pittsburgh as well. So they added some depth pieces in the draft and by those signings to their defense. And they have a guy coaching their defense who has continuity with the program. So these are all positive things. And you want some layer of continuity with so much change, right? So again, I'm looking to the defense here a little bit because we can't expect the offense to come out firing on all cylinders. Defense is going to have to keep offenses at bay. Right now, I still rate this group as very average, but with higher upside, right? We're starting to see the pieces put together here for the Raiders, but still a lot of if, and it always depends, right? Sociologically, how quickly they form, norm, come together as a group, because I think they have more parts than usual, from the leadership position to the talent on their roster. Their schedule is tough because their division is tough. When you have to face the Chiefs and the Broncos every season, and the Chargers aren't easy either, it ain't going to be an easy year, right? And then they also have the NFC East in the interconference slate of opponents that they have to face as well. I think the Giants are going to be better this year. The Commanders and Eagles are very legit, and I think the Cowboys are going to be better this year. So that's not easy either. They do have the AFC South on their schedule, which is a bit easier than most of the other opponents that they face. But this is a tough schedule. Especially, considering who we're talking about. This is a Raiders team who I can see their path to 6 wins, but 7 or 8 is getting really tough. So I do think that 6.5 is a perfect win total for them. I have no desire to bet that up or down, although you should know the chalk is on the over. There are more people who are betting on them getting more than 6.5 wins, which is interesting in a division with Denver, Kansas City, and the Chargers, especially the Chiefs and the Broncos, because I think the Broncos are going to be dangerous this season, and we know the Chiefs always are. I give them a power rating of 69. And again, these wholesale changes are good overall. But if it doesn't turn over there in Vegas in 2 to 3 seasons, and I would say they got about 2 to show substantial change, if that doesn't change very quickly, how much patience is the ownership group and this cyclical, perennial Raiders disappointment going to continue, right? Like, this is a team that at least has to threaten for the playoffs, I think this season and definitely next season. And that's hard to do with so much transformation. I like the guys they got, though. I don't have any problems with it. I wish they had a little bit better of a quarterback. I like Geno, but I don't know if Geno's going to elevate this entire offense. A lot of things have to come together still. Next up is the Los Angeles Chargers.